Hello, Burst users. My name is Florence Nguyen Quang, and I am with the Center for Early Reading at Amplify. This video provides you with insight on how to group students and optimize schedules. Prior to this session, you should have completed the following sessions: Burst Overview, Intervention Coordinator Responsibilities, and Assessments for Burst. Scheduling and Grouping is the fourth webinar in the Intervention Coordinators series. We will be together for about 30 minutes. You'll need a copy of the handout that accompanies this session. Here you will see the objectives for our time together. We will go over 3 different approaches to grouping and their pros and cons. Then you will choose which grouping model is best for your school. I will then show you how to use the BURST algorithm to group your students. Next, we will move on to scheduling, and we will discuss common roadblocks for scheduling, go over some scheduling tips, and how to adjust your existing class and staff schedule to ensure you get 100% coverage for students who need intervention. Finally, I will show you how to assign BURST instructors to each group. Recall that BURST is delivered in groups of 4 to 5 students for 30 minutes of daily instruction. We're going to cover the various models and talk about how to choose one. But before we begin talking about the different grouping models, let's take a moment to think about some of the challenges we sometimes face when it comes to grouping. Pause the video to reflect on those challenges and jot them down. Press play again when you're ready. There are 3 different approaches to grouping. Within a class, in which BURST groups are created from students within the same classroom. Cross-class, in which BURST groups are created from students in different classes at the same grade level. And cross-grade, in which BURST groups are created from students in different classes at different grade levels. What considerations should you take into account when selecting which to use? Pause the video to jot down your responses. Press play when you're ready. Let's take a closer look at what grouping within a class versus cross-class might look like at a hypothetical school called No Time Elementary School. This is a big school with 4 classrooms per grade. I am showing you the breakdown of kids in their 4 first-grade classrooms, each of which has 24 students. Students represented by a green dot scored benchmark or above benchmark and therefore do not need intervention. All other students are in need of intervention, and for those, we plot the particular point at which each currently is on the reading skills continuum. Let's take classroom 1. There are 9 students who do not need intervention, and 15 students who are in need of intervention. No Time Elementary School is a high-need school. Out of these 15 students who need intervention, 1 student needs phonological awareness and letter sound. That's the red dot. 3 students need phonological awareness and blending. Those are the 3 yellow dots. 3 students need letter sound and blending. Those are the 3 light blue dots. 4 students need blending and regular word recognition. The 4 dark blue dots. 2 students need regular word recognition and irregular word recognition, the 2 light purple dots. 1 student needs regular word recognition and letter combination, the dark purple dot. And 1 student needs letter combination and advanced phonics. That's the 1 pink dot. Now look at classroom 2. There are 11 students who do need intervention. Out of these 11 students, 2 students need phonological awareness and blending. 2 students need letter sound and blending. 3 students need blending and regular word recognition. 2 students need regular word recognition and letter combination. And 2 students need letter combination and advanced phonics. If we were to group within a class, classroom 1 would need 7 different intervention groups that would each focus on different skills, and classroom 2 would need 5 different intervention groups. Look at your handout. How many different groups would you need in classrooms 3 and 4? Pause the video to complete page 1 of your handout. Press play when you're ready. Classroom 3 would need 4 different intervention groups, and classroom 4 would need 6 different intervention groups. This gives us a total of 22 groups for first grade. Now, if we were to group cross-class, here is an example of what we might do. We would look for students who have the same needs across the 4 classrooms. Let's start with students who need phonological awareness and letter sound. Those are the red dots. There is 1 student in classroom 1, 2 in classroom 3, and 1 in classroom 4. Those 4 students can be in the same group. Next, we can take a look at students who need blending and regular word recognition. Those are the dark blue dots. There are 4 students in classroom 1, 3 in classroom 2, and 3 in classroom 4. Keeping in mind that we do not want groups that exceed 5 students, that will create 2 groups. Look at your handout. How many different groups would you have for each of the skill profiles if you continue to group across classrooms? Pause the video to complete page 1 of your handout. Press play when you're ready. Let's compare how many groups we get. Within a class, there were 22 groups in first grade, and cross-class, there were 10 groups in first grade. As you can probably guess, our recommended option is to group cross-class. As you just saw, cross-class grouping reduced the number of groups needed by at least 50% and created more homogeneous groups. This in turn enables for more targeted instruction and results in quicker student progress. We've included this list of pros and cons for each different grouping model in your handout. In looking at these 3 different grouping approaches, which do you think is best for your school? You may need to consult with the grade level team or your school leader before finalizing your grouping approach. Next, I will show you how to group your students using the burst algorithm. At this point in time, all students should have been assessed in dibbles and burst to place them into the most accurate and most homogeneous groups. For this part, you will log into mclasshome.com. Once you've logged in and clicked on the burst icon, you will arrive to our burst landing page. Click on Create Groups. On this next screen, you will be able to select each class from which you will group students. Your first step is to determine how you'd like to group students. You can group within a class, cross-class, or cross-grade. Remember that our recommendation is to group cross-class. Start with 1 grade level at a time, then drag all of the classes into the pool. Here you see that at No Time Elementary, we decided on cross-class grouping in first grade. So I'm selecting all of the first grade classrooms. Determine the number of burst groups you will need based on how many students you will put in burst. Keep in mind that we recommend no more than 5 students per burst group. So divide your total number of students by 4.5 to get an approximate number of burst groups you need to create. Select the number of burst groups from the drop-down menu. Then you can click on Edit your grouping preferences. Here you can opt to filter out students whose risk level is benchmark, above benchmark, or not available. Be sure to check all the boxes under risk level. This is because you have already selected which students should get burst from your own screener. Therefore, all students who are in the hallway or who are currently showing up in MClass should be placed into burst groups. Determine if you want to filter out students with IEPs or English language learners. Some students with IEPs have other intervention programs already specified on their IEP. You can opt to exclude those students from being grouped. Some ELLs might only qualify for a language-based intervention program, such as oral language development programs, instead of a reading skills intervention. You can choose to exclude ELL students from your burst grouping as well. You will probably leave all of these boxes checked. As we've mentioned earlier, you have screened your students for burst, and all students who are showing up in the hallway should be grouped. You see here that we will include everyone by default, and we can always drag out individual students if necessary. Select your preferred group size. Remember that we recommend no more than 5 students per group. Once you have edited your grouping preferences, click on Create Groups and let the burst algorithm do its work over the next minute. The burst algorithm does an item-level analysis to determine where each student is on the reading skills progression. After the analysis is complete, burst determines which specific skills each student needs to work on and who else is at the same point in the progression. It then forms homogeneous groups of students according to the specifications you entered. You may see this red triangle on 1 or more students. If this happens, it may mean that the student needs to work on an earlier skill. If you hover your mouse over it, you will see what the skill is. Here for Jenny, we see that she needs to work on phonological awareness and letter sounds, according to Burst's skills profile, but that her current group will focus on letter sounds and blending. If you click on the skills, you will see the burst reading skills-based model, which shows you that phonological awareness will not be covered in this group's skills. There are 3 groups that cover the skills that Gianni needs, phonological awareness and letter sounds, but she was not placed in one of these as we selected our preferred group size to be capped at 5 students. You can manually drag her into one of these 3 groups above if the interventionist is okay to have 6 students in the group. That will also reduce group 4 to 4 students. If we scroll down, we see this red triangle again in group 10. Here, setup needs to work on letter sounds and blending, so we will manually move him to group 9, which will address those 2 skills. Once you've made these adjustments, be sure to click Save, and you're all set for this grade level. For now, you will keep yourself as the teacher, and once we have figured out the scheduling, then you can go back in the system to edit the burst instructor and assign the groups to the right interventionist. Next, we are going to determine the most efficient intervention schedule. Recall that the recommended dosage of burst is a daily 30-minute intervention. One of the keys to a successful implementation is making sure that burst actually does happen 5 times a week. Scheduling intervention can be very challenging. When scheduling intervention, what are some of your biggest roadblocks? Pause the video to reflect and jot down some notes. Press play when you're ready. When planning intervention, do you ever find yourself having to make the tough decision of selecting which of your students in need of intervention will actually get it? One of the biggest mistakes we often make in planning intervention is to use existing schedules and try to fit in as many groups as possible. Why might that be an issue? Well, with that model, we may not have 100% coverage. So we will have to prioritize who would get intervention and what students who need it may not actually get intervention. In this next section of our webinar, I will show you how you can tweak your schedules with existing staff to ensure that all students who need intervention get it. In our framework for grouping and scheduling, there are 3 things that need to be in balance to have a good program: the number of staff in their schedule, class schedules, and the number of burst groups. Those 3 things are what you need to optimize on. The best schools take the number of burst group as a given, as in the number of burst group would be fixed, and change staff and class schedules to keep things balanced. Let's take a closer look at what that means and how these interact with one another. Let's go back to No Time Elementary School. There are a total of 23 burst groups in kindergarten through 2nd grade. So we had 10 groups in 1st grade that we saw earlier, 5 groups in kindergarten, and 8 groups in 2nd grade. Here is their kindergarten through 2nd grade daily instructional schedule. Since all grades, kinder through 2nd, have core subject instruction in the morning, the only times to pull students for burst intervention would be from 12:30 to 2:45. If we include our recommended 5-minute transitions, that allows for 4 burst groups to be pulled out. No Time Elementary School has 4 interventionists. If each interventionist takes on 4 groups, that means there would be a coverage for 16 groups. Now let's go back to our framework. If we have 4 interventionists and keep class schedules the same, the only way for this to be in balance is to have 16 burst groups. This leaves 7 burst groups with no coverage. In most schools, it is often difficult to increase the number of personnel who can deliver intervention services. So let me show you how we can play around with class and staff schedules to maximize intervention services and get 100% burst coverage. Let's first go over a few scheduling tips. In order to keep with our framework on grouping and scheduling, we know that we have to keep the number of burst groups fixed. We do this in order to ensure 100% coverage of intervention for students who need it. That is, we will adjust the other 2 things to keep it balanced. Also, if a student is behind in reading, you have to prioritize burst and choose what the student will have to give up because they will fall further behind. The first priority in elementary school is to learn how to read. A student who cannot read will not be able to move forward through elementary school. We'll also be sure to schedule intervention outside of core subject areas so that students receive the regular literacy block and intervention in addition to that. We'll stagger when core subject instruction happens in each grade and have one master schedule per grade level. We will also schedule specials by grade level. I will take you through all of the steps to do that. Staff schedules. Be sure to use your paraprofessionals. Since this is an explicit program, take advantage of it. Maximize the number of burst groups per person. Training needs. Be sure to find no more than 6 burst groups per person and no more than 3 groups back to back. Remember to include transition time, at least 5 minutes, between burst groups and 10 minutes of prep time for each burst lesson. Finally, include lunch or any other breaks in the schedule. Let me show you how we can work on rearranging schedules to ensure 100% coverage of all burst groups. Recall that this is the original daily instructional schedule for grades K through 2. We are going to actually start with the specials schedule. The specials schedule includes music, PE, art, technology, library, and sometimes science. Here you see that the specials will take place at the same time every day for a particular grade level. So for example, second grade will have specials every day from 8:30 to 9:30. First grade will have their specials every day from 9:30 to 10:30. This is a time during which first grade teachers might be released and can therefore meet in their grade level teams. The schedule is also aligned with having one dedicated teacher that teaches the class, such as music on Mondays, for example, to all different grade levels, or physical education on Tuesday, for example. Next, we are going to rearrange the daily instructional schedules so that we can stagger burst intervention and maximize the time that interventionists can deliver burst. Here you see that specials have been staggered so that we can have burst with second graders from 8:30 to 9:30, with first graders from 9:30 to 10:30, and with kindergartners from 12:30 to 1:30. The red blocks are the core subject matters during which these students, or in that particular grade level, cannot be pulled for burst. The green cells demonstrate times during which students can be pulled during burst. So here you see that kinder, first, and second graders can be pulled for burst from 1:30 to 2:45, in addition to their specials block. Next, we will work on the interventionist schedule. What I usually do is pull up the daily instructional schedule and figure out the times during which a specific grade level can receive burst. So if an interventionist starts his or her schedule at 8:15 and ends at 2:45, I'm going to put 30-minute blocks of time with a 5-minute transition time in between each 30-minute block. Next, I'm going to look at each of these 30-minute blocks and see what grade levels can be serviced at this time. From 8:15 to 8:45, let's look at kindergarten. That overlaps with their literacy block. First grade also overlaps with a core subject matter of math. However, second grade can be pulled during this time. From 8:50 to 9:20, we have the same problem with kindergarten and first grade core subject matters, but second grade can be pulled during this time. And I go down with each 30-minute block and see which grade levels can be pulled during that specific time. Note that in the afternoon, from 1:40 to 2:45, all K, first, and second grade students have science or social studies or other non-core subject matters during which students can be pulled for burst intervention. Once I have my interventionist schedule template with the times during which each grade level can be pulled, I make a cell for each of the burst groups in each grade level. So for example, earlier we saw that first grade had 10 burst groups, kindergarten had 5 burst groups at No Time Elementary, and second grade had 8 burst groups. Then all I'm going to do is plug these into the slots during which students can be pulled. So I know that from 8:15 to 9:20, during sessions 1 and 2, I will not be able to plug any kinder or first grade groups. Instead, I will go ahead and plug in my second grade groups. All right, all of my groups are now plugged in. What do you notice here? Let's check and make sure that we kept up with our scheduling tips. Does each interventionist have no more than 6 groups? Have we scheduled no more than 3 groups back to back? Ooh, we see that this is an issue here. We have 4 groups back to back. So let's look for another time during which first grade can be pulled. We see that during sessions 6 and 7, first grade could also be pulled for burst. So let's move these groups down here. We have included lunch for our interventionists, as well as if we have 6 groups and each group requires 10 minutes of planning, that's 60 minutes total, which is included right here. We could move these planning times or keep them during the same time for all interventionists so that if we ever needed to provide extra support, we could have the entire team of interventionists there. Since we moved some of our first grade groups down, we now see that first grade students will be pulled during 3 different sessions. Also note that as much as possible, we try to group each grade level in as few sessions as possible. This minimizes disruptions for a specific grade level. So second grade students will only be pulled from 8:15 to 9:20, and kindergarten students will be pulled from 12:30 to 1:35. Here we note that we have 1 session added. And voila, here is our final interventionist schedule. Now that we have our interventionist schedules, we need to go back into the system and assign the right burst teacher to each group. Note that all of our groups are down here. I am going to open each group in a new tab by right-clicking and selecting Open in a new tab. This will speed up the process of reassigning the right burst teacher. Here I see that Interventionist 1 will have First Grade Group 1, First Grade Group 9, and First Grade Group 5. Here is First Grade Group 1. I will go into Edit Group. And under Burst Teacher, select the name of Interventionist 1. Say Interventionist 1 is Alberto Ward. So Alberto is going to get Group 1. Make sure you click on Save. Here you see that Burst Teacher has been changed to Alberto Ward. Alberto will also get Groups 9 and 5. So let me find Group 5. This is Groups 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here you see that's my Group 5. Going to Edit Group and change it from me to Alberto. Click on Save. And find Group 9. Next, I will work on the next interventionist who has groups 2, 6, and 10. So pull up my group 2, edit, and Harriet is interventionist 2. So she will get groups 2, 6, and 10. Be sure to change each of the burst teachers for each burst group once you have the interventionist schedule. To make it easier on myself, once I have changed it to the right teacher, I can go ahead and close that tab. All right, here are your suggested next steps. Although these may seem complicated, it's all in the attention to detail. The most difficult thing you might have to face is staff resistance to changing schedules. This is not unusual. You might encounter some who prefer to keep schedules as they are until a better time. Some may have valid reasons. Others may just be resistant to change. You may think that there's a better time to make changes in the schedule, but the reality is that there never will be a right time to implement these big systemic changes. We just need to start now. Wow, we went over a lot of important information today. Here are a few key takeaways for you to consider as you plan out your next steps. Intentionally pick the grouping model you will use, whether it's within a class, cross-class, or cross-grade. We recommend cross-class grouping so that burst creates more homogeneous groups using a larger pool of students with similar needs. Treat grouping and scheduling like a puzzle that you have to solve. Every puzzle has givens and things that you can change. Consider the number of burst groups as a given and treat staff and class schedules as changeable. At high-need schools with lots of kids in needs and thus lots of groups, this is more challenging to approach, but it's the only way to cover all students who need intervention. Once you solve the puzzle, you will be glad you were able to give more students the intervention they need to catch up. Burst is most effective when a group receives burst intervention for 30 minutes daily. This is what makes the intervention intensive. When scheduling burst, make sure that the time block is protected and will not have interruptions or cancellations. Include transition times and prep time in the staff schedules. Each burst block of time should be at least 35 minutes, 30 minutes for burst instruction and 5 minutes for transition. If you are staff constrained, use your paraprofessionals. Take advantage of the fact that burst lessons are very detailed and explicit. Try to avoid giving a lot of staff members a few burst groups to teach. It is better if you concentrate burst instruction into the hand of a few people, so fewer people will need to be onboarded, trained, and supported. But also avoid giving any one person more than 6 burst groups per day or 3 groups back-to-back so that they can keep their energy level high for their students. Thank you for watching the grouping and scheduling module.